Henry the young king was born on the last day of February 1155 in London, the second-born son of Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine. In 1170 he was crowned as co-king to his father, and his title, the young king, helps to differentiate between the two. In reality, the young king was not a king at all, and his father remained very much the ruling monarch. It was frustration at this that caused the young king to become antagonized towards his father, and, along with his surviving brothers, he would rebel against the king. Though the young king's life would be a short one, he died aged only 28 in 1183. He left his mark on history and caused his father much grief in the process. At the time of the young king's birth, he was not his father's heir, and was rather the spare. He had an older brother, William, but sadly the little William died the year after his brother's birth. William was no older than 3 at the time of his death, and he was buried at Reading Abbey, near to his great-grandfather, Henry I. So the young king was now heir to the English crown. Although Henry the young king would live considerably longer than the little William, he would also predecease Henry II. 3 more brothers would follow Henry the young king, including 2 who would actually become king, Richard the Lionheart and John. During his childhood, the young king found himself caught up in the feud between his father and Thomas Becket. Becket had been trusted to oversee the younger Henry's upbringing, but his increasingly headstrong behaviour as Archbishop of Canterbury saw Henry II remove his heir from the Archbishop's care. In the summer of 1163, Henry II and the now 8-year-old Prince Henry had homage paid to them by the King of Scots, Malcolm IV, and also by the Welsh. Prince Henry was being prepared for the art of kingship, and in 1170 he was formally crowned by the Archbishop of York in the absence of Thomas Becket. Not long after the coronation ceremony had been performed, Henry II crossed to France, where he met Becket and came to a very tense peace with his Archbishop. Henry II wrote to the young king, who had remained in England, telling his son that Thomas, Archbishop of Canterbury, has made peace with me in accordance with my wishes. Therefore, I order that he and his followers may have peace, and that you see to it that he and his followers should have their possessions in peace and in honour. The young king, now maturing, was entrusted by his father to ensure that Becket returned to England in peace. In the middle of December 1170, Becket was travelling to see the young king when he was ordered to halt. Henry II had sent his son another message that Becket was not permitted to visit him. Obliging his father, the young king ordered Becket to turn back. Just days later, Becket again infuriated the king by excommunicating some of his followers, one of whom was described as being a violent oppressor of the church. This led to Henry II's now famous outburst, wishing to be rid of Becket, and 4 knights duly obliged. This was, of course, a political disaster for Henry II, and for the next few years it was a case of damage limitation for him. Now was surely not the time to delegate additional powers to his sons, whom he had clearly shown he had trust in. But the young king and his brothers were youthful, immature, and prone to listen to voices that they shouldn't have. And further, perhaps unexpected trouble was on the horizon for Henry II. In 1172, the young king married Margaret, daughter of Louis VII of France, with whom his father had a turbulent relationship. having married Louis's former wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine. Although this marriage may have bound Henry II and Louis closer together, the French king would not let an opportunity pass him by to cause angst for the King of England. That opportunity came in 1173 when his son in law came to him. One night in March, the young king left his father's side at Argenton and rode to join Louis, where his brothers, Richard and Geoffrey, would join him. The king was woken from his sleep and told of his son's rebellion. Henry II, ever ready for such a crisis, immediately strengthened his French castles in a state of preparation for civil war with his sons. Assisted by Louis, his brothers, and the Count of Flanders, and with the encouragement of his mother Eleanor, the young king made his move against his father, launching an assault on Normandy, where he captured a number of castles. Henry II wasted no time in responding, gathering an army together, and he marched through Normandy, ensuring the duchy's loyalty to him. But still, the conflict wore on, with Henry tracking down his other son, Richard, at Sens in 1174, capturing dozens of his knights and hundreds of his archers. Although Henry II was clearly demonstrating what an outstanding leader he was, the machinations of the young king and Louis continued, and soon the war would land on English shores, with the Count of Flanders promising to send an army to invade England to further the young king's cause, which now appeared to be taking the form of a rebellion which aimed for a full-blown usurpation. Could it be that this young prince, not yet 20, could overthrow the mighty Henry II, all in the name of his father, supposedly not handing him enough power? It was a prospect that appeared to be growing ever more possible. In May 1174, a force of Flemish soldiers landed in England, attacking Norwich, pillaging it, and taking hostages. The leading men in England were growing ever more fearful at how the war was playing out, and even worse, it seemed to them that Henry II was prioritising his French possessions and leaving England wholly unprotected. The Bishop of Winchester crossed the Channel and urged the king to return to England, which he duly did. On his return, Henry II made another public show of penance for the death of Becket, perhaps fearful his recent troubles with the young king were a result of his past sins. Henry swiftly dealt with the invading Flemings and allowed them to return home. With the failure of the invasion of England, the young king instead focused on Normandy, laying siege to Rouen. However, he met with stubborn resistance, and rumours began to reach his ears that Henry II was once again approaching. Henry II was a man well known for his ability to travel long distances at speed, and his energy shocked even the French king. It is perhaps no surprise that such a man was able to create panic in the ranks of his enemies. The young king's siege was a failure, and he had to retreat from Rouen. For the time being, at least, peace reigned. Henry II wrote in a letter to the leading men of England, I shall give my son £15,000 Argentine money per annum, and 2 castles in Normandy at my pleasure. To Richard I shall give half the revenues of Poitou, and 2 castles from which he cannot harm me. To Geoffrey half the revenues of Brittany. Whether this would be enough to keep his sons happy, Henry II must have had his doubts. But either way, he was much more gracious in victory than others may have been. The young king was far less gracious in defeat. Whilst Henry II released the knights he had taken prisoner without the need for ransom, the young king demanded payment. The young king demonstrated that he had learned very little from his father, who had given him a clear example of how to win or win back the loyalty of men. Nevertheless, the young king's relationship with his father had markedly improved by the middle of 1175. One chronicler wrote, "They ate together at the normal meal times on the same table and rested their limbs in the same bedroom." The young king also joined his father on pilgrimage to Canterbury, which must have been a solemn and rather awkward experience for the young king. The previous couple of years had been expensive for the young king, and he had racked up sizable debts, which Henry II paid off. Whether the young king was grateful for that, or perhaps resentful at having to rely on his father, is another question. Henry II continued to try and keep his son on side by taking his advice on matters such as appointing justices. But was the young king sufficiently interested in the day-to-day business of kingship? For the young king, there were more glamorous things he could be doing. One such distraction was participating in tournaments, of which he was renowned. Bertrand de Born wrote this of the young king's exploits in the tournament. "He was the best king who ever took up a shield, the most daring and best of all tourneyers. From the time when Roland was alive, and even before, never was seen a knight so skilled, so warlike, whose fame resounded so around the world, even if Roland did come back, or if the world was searched as far as the river Nile and the setting sun." Obviously, these exploits came at a price, and the young king would spend much money demonstrating his prowess across France and enhancing his reputation as something of a medieval celebrity. For Henry II, this was a much happier state of affairs. His son was getting a taste of the glory that he was desperate for, and venting some of the frustrations he held in a way that wasn't destructive for the Angevin Empire. In 1180, Louis VII of France died, and he was succeeded by Philip II. The young king, married to Philip's half sister, attended Philip's coronation. In 1182, another feud broke out, with the young king at loggerheads with both his father and Richard. But having gathered a large army, the young king fell gravely ill with dysentery. Realizing he was dying, the young king sent a message to his father. But Henry II by now had had enough. He told the young king in a letter that he was fearful of yet more treachery being committed by his sons, and he refused to come to the young king. So it was that Henry the young king died a broken and lonely young man, desperate for reconciliation with his father, but not getting it. It was a pitiable death, and for Henry II, the aging king, he would mourn his son greatly, despite the troubles that the young king had caused him.